honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen.
Lähema sajandi jooksul tuleb inimkonnal leida lahendus probleemile, kus suudame säilitada meie planeedi võimaliku massihävituse eest. Jaatav vastus sõltub meie ühisest tahtest ja jõupingutustest.
Within a century, mankind must find a solution to the question of whether we can preserve our planet from potential mass destruction.
Tänu teaduse ja tehnika arengule kahekordistub inimkonna teadmiste maht keskmiselt 2 inimkonna põlvkonna jooksul. Samal ajal ei ole inimene võimeline oma teadmisi ja kogemusi pärilikkuse teel oma järglastele edasi andma.
A positive answer depends on our common will and efforts. Thanks to developments in science and technology, mankind's volume of knowledge, on average, doubles every 2 generations. Yet man is unable to pass on his knowledge and experience to his children by hereditary means.
Seega muutub teadmiste püramiidi tippu ronimine üha raskemaks, isegi kõige kitsamal erialal. See omakorda viib sotsiaalse kihistumiseni, mis hakkab vastu töötama demokraatia ühele põhiprintsiibile võrdsusele.
Which means that it becomes increasingly difficult to climb the pyramid of knowledge, even in the most specialized of fields. This, in turn, leads to social stratification that starts to work against one of the main principles of democracy, equality.
Loodusteaduste ja tehnika arengule toetuv tsivilisatsiooni kiire areng möödunud sajandi jooksul on jätnud varju inimarengu teised küljed, sealhulgas moraali ja eetika. Just viimaseid külgi silmas pidades tuleb tõdeda, et meie kaasaegsed erinevad oma egoismi, võimu ja saamaimu poolest üsna vähe Shakespeare'i aegsetest inimestest.
The past century's swift development of civilization, depending on natural sciences and technology, has overshadowed other aspects of human development, among them ethics and morality. Bearing this in mind, we must recognize that when it comes to egoism, power hungriness, and greed, our contemporaries differ very little from those who lived in the days of Shakespeare.
Võime tõdeda, et tsivilisatsiooni arenguga on kaasnenud kõrvuti positiivsetega ka negatiivsete külgede võimendumine.
We realize that with the development of civilization, there has been an amplification of negative aspects alongside positive ones.
Möödunud 20. sajand läheb ajalukku kui enneolematute poliitiliste massimõrvade sajand. Esimene maailmasõda nõudis 10 miljonit inimelu, teine maailmasõda aga juba 50 miljonit inimest. Stalin ja Hitleri läbi viidud genotsiid nõudis 10 ja 100 miljoneid inimelusid.
History will remember the 20th century as one of unprecedented political mass murder. World War I claimed 10 million lives, World War II already 50 million. Stalin and Hitler's genocide erased the lives of tens and hundreds of millions.
Tsivilisatsiooni arenguga on inimkonnal tekkinud pidev ohutunne, kuna loodud massihävitusrelvad võimaldavad kogu inimkonna ja biosfääri tahtliku hävitamise.
With the development of civilization, man has developed a permanent sense of threat, because weapons of mass destruction enable the voluntary destruction of mankind and the entire biosphere.
Siit jõuame kultuuri juurde, toetudes kultuuridiplomaatiale, mis haarab oma tegevusega terveid kontinente, on põhimõtteliselt võimalik üles ehitada maailm ilma sõdade ja inimohvriteta, kus konfliktide lahendusi otsitakse ja leitakse läbirääkimiste laua taga.
This brings us to culture. Drawing on cultural diplomacy, which covers entire continents, it becomes possible, in principle, to construct a world without war and human casualties, in which solutions to conflicts are sought and found at negotiation tables.
Kultuuridiplomaatia ei ole ainult erinevate riikide ja rahvaste kultuuri tutvustamine teistele riikidele ja rahvastele. Kultuuridiplomaatiaks võib julgelt pidada ka nõnda nimetatud kultuurset diplomaatiat.
cultural diplomacy is not only about introducing the cultures of different countries and peoples to other states and nations. Cultural diplomacy can also mean a so-called culture or civilized diplomacy.
Üheks näiteks siinkohal võiks olla supervõimu NSV Liidu lagunemise ilma suuremate inimohvriteta, kus teatud osa oli täita ka Balti riikidel, sealhulgas Eestil.
One example could be the collapse of the Soviet superpower without a large number of human casualties, a process in which the Baltic states, including Estonia, had a certain role to play. By the mid-1980s, it had become clear that the Soviet Union's economy had reached a deep crisis. This was caused by a technological backwardness in comparison to the West, by an inefficient planned economy based on extensive production, the priority development of the military industry, the war in Afghanistan. The Soviet Union has lost the arms race of the Cold War. This crisis situation was perceived very clearly in the Baltics, especially Estonia. At first, most Estonians were hesitant about the reform policies that Mikhail Gorbachev initiated in 1985. But when it became apparent in the spring of 1987 that the Soviet Union intended to build phosphate mines in northern Estonia, an extensive wave of protests erupted, the so-called Phosphorus War. In a way, this kicked off the whole process of Estonia's restoration of independence, in which political demands were quickly added to environmental topics. In 1987, an Estonian group was created that requested the publication of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This pact had left Estonia into the Soviet Union's sphere of interest, something which also enabled the annexation of Estonia. This was followed by half a century of what was called an intensive model of the economy, the result of which was a rapid exhaustion of our mineral resources. The intensive development of industry gave occasion to import foreign workers until we stood face to face with a situation where we were becoming a minority in our own country. The proportion of non-Estonian speakers had risen to over 42%, and this number showed a continuing growth tendency. In parallel to political demands, Estonians began to request the right of making economic decisions themselves. In April 1988, the People's Front, or Rahvarinne, was established and began to demand the democratization of the Soviet Union, as well as political and economic autonomy for Estonia within the USSR. The summer of 1988 unleashed a wave of concerts and song festivals that developed into a nationwide movement and that today bears the name of the Singing Revolution. As a result of all this, a leading role in everything that was going on in society concentrated in the Estonian Supreme Soviet and its Presidium, which I was entrusted to lead during these critical years. On the 16th of November 1988, we were the first Soviet Republic of the USSR to adopt a declaration of sovereignty, in which we affirmed that laws adopted by the Soviet Union would only take effect in Estonia after they had been approved by the Estonian Supreme Soviet. In fact, our declaration of sovereignty has been viewed as the catalyst of the USSR's demise, as a legal battle in which the Soviet Union ended up on the losing side. We were alone in that war because our requests for help had remained unanswered by the other Soviet republics. We must admit that the non-violent collapse of the Soviet Union happened largely thanks to lawyers who, based on international law, were able to prove that genuine meaning could be applied to the sovereignty that USSR's constitution granted its republics on paper. Having set the course for the restoration of an independent Estonia, we established working groups within the Estonian Supreme Soviet that would critically examine the whole legal framework in order to prepare Estonia's restoration of independence. Today, we can say that the regularity, logic, and legal quality of the legislation that was created has remained exemplary for our legislation up until this very day. On the 8th of August 1989, the ESSR's Supreme Soviet adopted the decision to initiate an administrative reform, and thereafter the law on organizing local elections. On the 20th of December 1989, the first free and democratic local elections took place in Estonia. Thanks to legislative drafting that was capable of anticipating events, changes in Estonian society could take place peacefully and in a reasonable manner, also when looked at from an international legal perspective. Our people's common effort was crowned with success on the 20th of August 1991, when during an attempted military coup in Moscow, we declared Estonia to be independent. Our example was contagious across the whole superpower that imploded without any significant human casualties. What I have just outlined can serve as a positive example of cultured 20th century diplomacy, proving that by reforming social formations, it is possible to find a peaceful and civilized solution. Ladies and gentlemen, Estonia belongs to the family of the world's small states, but Estonia's activities are grounded in flexibility, diversity, and sustainability. We have a temperate climate with a sufficient amount of precipitation, a cool summer, and 4 clearly distinguishable seasons. Our small state is rich in mineral resources. We have oil shale, sandstone, phosphate ore, blue clay, limestone, forests, etc. Thus far, we have been able to satisfy most of our energy needs with oil shale, but we also make use of peat, wood, household waste, sun, and wind energy. We have enough arable land to feed our people. We have sufficient drinking water reserves, and there is also enough water for households and industrial purposes. We can confidently look into the future and follow the path of sustainable development that we adopted as our aim right after the restoration of our independence on the 20th of August 1991. The United Nations, the Brundtland Report, has phrased the principle of sustainability in the following way. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Estonia has outlined its sustainable development goals up until 2030. Already in 2005, Estonia adopted a national sustainable development goal strategy, Sustainable Estonia 21, which was based on the Sustainable Development Law that the Parliament passed in 1995. The Sustainable Estonia 21 strategy's 4 main goals are an increase in the well-being of the people, the vitality of the Estonian national culture, ecological balance, and the coherence of society. During recent years, we have increasingly paid attention to applying the principle of permaculture. What exactly do I have in mind? Permaculture is the unity of art and science where society's sustainable development is guaranteed by being based on natural laws. A radical approach to producing food, to energy management, water use, environmental pollution, including the design of forest and agrarian ecosystems, landscape architecture, eco-gardening, and construction. Using technology that yields large profits at a low energy input, thereby achieving a diverse and sufficient resource. Over millennia, we have managed to design a unique national culture and to preserve our language. Freeing ourselves from the domination of the Soviet Union, we recognized that an intensive development of industry as well as the exploitation of military facilities, had left our natural environment in an extraordinarily precarious state. Based on available facts, we can say that at the time of regaining independence, the Russian army held 1,505 facilities in around 800 different places, with a total area of 87,147 hectares, which is around 1.9% of Estonian territory. According to Newsweek, the USSR's strategic rocket forces had at their disposal up to 270 nuclear warheads. The situation became especially dangerous after the Russian forces left Estonia in 1994, when an unchecked amount of waste was additionally allowed to be poured into the environment. A state commission was immediately formed in order to evaluate the harm done and to prevent or eliminate the spread of the pollution. With the help of the European Union, we have managed to neutralize and reorder all former Soviet military objects that pose a threat to people's lives and health. The path of sustainable development presupposes that the improvement of life quality be guaranteed in accordance with the ecosystem's level of endurance. Generally, such a development path strives towards striking a balance between the social sphere, the economy, and the environment. And this is where we immediately arrive at culture. It is difficult to imagine human development outside a cultural space. Getting rid of the pollution caused by the military was an important step in the recreation of a cultural or man-made landscape. Arranging our natural environment cannot be viewed separately from Estonia's other sustainable development factors. In many fields, we have been able to keep up with the world's developed countries, and here are some examples to prove this. We have been successful in developing information technology. Skype, which is widely used across the world, was born in Estonia. Recently, foreign policy named Kalev Leetaru, a scientist with Estonian roots, as one of the world's most influential thinkers, saying that his model helps predict the future. His method is based on using supercomputers to analyze public data. The patterns that the computer generates make it possible to predict key changes in world politics. There is reason to believe that this method can also be employed in so-called cultured diplomacy. Also, the OECD recently published the results of its 2012 PISA study. Among the 65 states surveyed, Estonian children ranked among the top 10 in terms of knowledge. Let us hope that our efforts in education become a good basis for Estonia's future sustainable development.
Filosoofid on olnud seda meelt, et ühiskonna jätkusuutliku arengu aluseks on kultuur kõigis oma avaldamisvormides.
Ladies and gentlemen, philosophers have agreed that culture, in all its configurations, is the foundation of society's sustainable development.
Eesti väikerahva talletatud kultuurikihistu on olnud selleks vundamendiks, millele oleme ehitanud oma kodu vabaks saamise ja ise olemise.
The layer of culture that the Estonian people have stored up has been the foundation upon which we have built our homes, being free and independent.
Kuid parema eluni on meil läbi käia veel väga pikk tee. Me ei ole oma riigi ülesehitamisel pööranud piisavat tähelepanu sotsiaalsfäärile.
There, however, remains a long road ahead towards a better life. While building up our state, we have not given sufficient attention to the social sphere.
Selle tulemusena oleme me OSCE andmetele tuginedes alamakstud, ületöötanud, kehva tervisega ja õnnetamad kui paljud teised rahvad.
As a result, and according to the OECD, we are underpaid, overworked, unhealthy, and unhappy compared to many other nations.
kuid me liigume selles suunas, et lähitulevikus välja töötada terviklik ja süsteemne kava Eesti elu edendamiseks. Tänan tähelepanu eest.
But we are headed in the direction where, in the near future, we can develop an integrated and systemic plan for the improvement of Estonian life. I thank you for your attention.